What's going on, everyone? So we have another week of being Django free and another week where we had a bunch of small tournaments take place. Now, I'm not going to continue doing this after this week unless we have a big tournament where I talk about all kind of the decks showing up, because I'll say this, the meta is up in the air right now. There are so many different things being played and so many different decks that are actually having a good shot at winning without just getting completely trounced by Django or the old version of Han or whatever triple dark raid deck people were playing like Boba 4, etc, etc. This is definitely a more exciting meta. A big thank you to my patrons, and I have a TCG player link. But let's talk about some of these store showdowns. And I want to quickly mention before we dive into some of these store showdowns, yes, they are small tournaments. Yes, they don't mean a whole ton in terms of the grand scheme of the meta. But if you were to compare these store showdowns, which happened on the 19th, or even these ones, which happened on the 12th/13th, so all of this happened post Django. If you were to compare those to basically all of these tournaments and the smaller ones that you see, obviously the major tournaments, they don't really apply. We didn't really have a ton of store showdowns, but all the minor tournaments or online tournaments that people were doing, or things that were very, very small in nature, a lot of them had a ton of Django in them. A lot of them. And it also pushed out a lot of decks because of that. And since then, we've had a lot more decks being way more successful. Starting us off with this first store showdown, guys, we got Gar Saxon yellow winning the whole thing. In fact, 3 Gar Saxon in the top 8. Again, small tournament. Doesn't mean a whole lot in terms of top 8, but I do think Gar Saxon getting a lot of love here makes a lot of sense. For those of you that have played Gar Saxon, heck, even before Django's ban, it actually had a good matchup in a Django, which was crazy, by the way. It did some work, and it still does. It just does so much better with Krennic. Honestly, Krennic is the fuel for this deck. The ability to go like Krennic, Greedo, Krennic into Inferno Floor plus 2-drop on the following turn, or 3-drop, 2-drop plus another 2-drop in Inferno 4. The ability to have Krennic just be a 3/2 shielded on turn 1 just goes so hard. It is ridiculous. We're also seeing things like Quinlan, of course. We're going to see a ton of Quinlan in general, and some other fun decks. Boba 4 still staying in the loop. I still think this deck is pretty good. It's not nearly as good as it was with Triple Dark Raid. I think if they were to ban Django, I think Boba Fett would have had a real good shot at doing some major work in the meta with Triple Dark Raid. So I'm glad they kind of took out Triple Dark Raid. I think Boba might have been a problem. And that would have been just too funny, honestly. Like having Boba being banned, Django being banned, and then the other Boba Fett taking over. It just would have been too much, to be honest. I don't think we could have recovered from that one. Someone's got a real big fan in FFG for Boba Fett and the Fetts in general. But overall, this is kind of what we're expecting. I think Gar Saxon really showing up here makes a ton of sense. The next Thor showdown, this one's a lot smaller. We got Cad Bane, Han Green, and Piet Red. Cad Red, classic, not surprising at that. I think Han Green has definitely been under the radar in general. It definitely got some new stuff with set 4. Things like Blue Leader are pretty good in a Han Green list. And actually, we could just pop over and see this list real quick. Han Green really doing the same stuff as Han Yellow for the most part in terms of Ahsoka's, Kira's, Ezra's, all that disruption nonsense. The key here is they have Ewing reinforcement, and this is a classic back from set 1. They did the lottery Han or the roulette Han. I forgot what they called. Oh my gosh. Basically the gambling Han, where you drop a Ewing reinforcement and you pull Luke Skywalker, which is a vigilance card, or you pull, I mean, in this case, they're playing Cad Bane. Basically, because of Ewing reinforcement, you get to cheat on those costs and play some pretty impressive cards. Very, very strong. Still does the whole extra resource thing and still can be an absolute nightmare. Next one, we got another Han Green. Really doing well. We got some Sabine's Litter in here. Some set 4 lists in the new Han, set 4 Han, and the set 4 Vader, which is pretty insane. The fact that we have 3 Hans, by the way. It's going to get a little bit complicated here for sure. I think these two are a little bit more on the memeier side, and what I mean by that is these lists definitely aren't quite as strong, and I think when we get to more in-depth tournaments, these lists aren't going to survive. And in fact, I think a lot of these lists won't necessarily perform as well, but I do think Sabine, Boba 4, Anakin, even Luke Green, this has been actually a pretty impressive list that's popped up again. Just having an extra couple of points of HP with Data Vault and then being able to go ahead and leverage in a format now without Django, I think Luke really benefited from that. Same with the DJ ban. So I don't want to be surprised to see some more Luke greens on the board. This Han red list, by the way, is really, really fun. If anyone's played the new Han Solo, it's just a lot of fun. C-3PO has been a classic for a lot of people. Basically just draw a card in that. But for the most part, you're just getting in a lot of damage, having a little bit of value here. And, well, the key is with the Han Solo flip, you just get to do absolutely gross things. The idea is you play a couple 1-drops, couple 3-drops, any odd card, and then you get to ready 3 to 4 to 5 resources when that comes down. And that's the game breaking part. That is the deciding factor. That's what actually allows Han to win, because otherwise you're not really doing all that incredible stuff. But if you're able to pilot onto a space unit and get that massive resource bump, that can absolutely overwhelm your opponent. And it does. It absolutely does. Next up, we got another showdown here. This one, classic double yellow Hans in here, Sabine greens. We got Anakin blues, Palp blues, Quinlan reds, Bosk blues. The only one that's a little bit odd here is the Kira blues. A little bit of hard control here. I definitely think the hard control lists aren't... It's weird because they got a nerf in a sense because Django was actually a good matchup for these hard control lists. So bringing hard control, fighting against the Djangos, that would have been good for you. But they got a buff because DJ is no longer here. So I guess that's a good thing. Overall, I think hard control still is an option to be playing. Certainly. I think Boss Blue is a great option. I think Palp Blue is also a great option. Colossus definitely helped you there. Han Yellow, not going away. I still will find this to be one of the better decks. And Han as a leader, one of the better leaders. Quinlan Reds, Anakin Blues, all very, very classic stuff. This other Star Showdown, we've got Quinlan Red taking the whole thing, Cad Red, Ray Red, Piet Blue, Obi-Wan Green. I think this is a list that some people, I wouldn't say necessarily like super sleeping on, in that I think it's starting to become a little bit more known. I made a video about this the other day, I believe. I wonder if I posted that video or if I posted another video. Anyways, Obi-Wan Green, maybe I'm posting it tomorrow. I don't know. I recorded it yesterday because I was super excited about Obi-Wan Green, but it does really good work against things like Cad, things like Quinlan, anything that's running Turkentown and kind of does these like random pings to control the early game. Obi-Wan actually does really, really well at. Lots of more controlling ramp lists in Palpatine and Piet and all that good stuff. All very cool stuff. Mace at 8th. This was a list that we were starting to see back in set 3 with Mace Blue being a little bit of a more controlling list. Not at any point a strong list, I would say, but something that people were experimenting with and had okay success with. The next one here, and this one's probably my favorite one so far. We got a lot of really, really cool ones. Kylo Red taking down the whole thing. It's only a 16-player store showdown. You can absolutely red hot as Kylo Red and get your Fallen Lightsaber draw and just smack people. Kylo Red is by far the fastest deck in the format. By far. I played it numerous times, and I probably will do another video on it just because I love playing the deck. It's just something, there's something cathartic about running in, playing 2-minute games. Like, that's just what happens. There isn't a whole lot your opponent can do to interact with it. This list in general, there's no deck list, but this list in general just runs through your opponents. It does so much work so quickly. And there are other lists out there that can win fast. Don't get me wrong, but Kylo wins on a dynamic that's extreme to the point where you win super fast and you lose super fast. So definitely not a list that I'm like, oh my gosh, it is absolutely like S tier or tier 1 or anything like that. Definitely in that more B tier, high B tier category for me, but can do some major work when the time comes. Cad Bane Red, Quinlan Red, Palp Double Green. This one we haven't seen in a while, but I do like Data Vault in the Double Green Palp list. The only downside to it is that you're not able to find your Vaders, Mauls, etc. as easy, especially in a double ramp deck that can kind of dilute down because you are running out of cards so quickly. On the other hand, Palpatine can draw a good amount of cards. So that's nice. Kira Green, this is a list that, actually does pretty good work up against Quinlan. This list actually just Kira Green just had a pretty good matchup up against Quinlan for the most part compared to a lot of other decks, and is something I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit more of. Anakin Blue, Double Red Bosk. I don't even know what people are playing in Double Red Boss. I don't know if it's like more of an aggro game plan or you're using guild bounties and such, but it's absolutely sweet to see. And then Obi-Wan Green, in this case ECL. I have seen a lot of people like, okay, do I want to go with the ECL? Do I want to go with 33/30 HP base? I've leaned more towards the controlling bases, whereas some people have liked the ECL. ECL can be good, especially with things like Riken is a lot of what people are running. But overall, either way, it's still solid up against the Quinlins and the Cad Banes, being able to heal off their pings. And those are all the store showdowns that we've seen. There's been a total of 6 of them between today and yesterday that have been sorted here on the site for Star Wars Limited Competitive Hub. There's, I'm sure, a ton more. It's just a matter of actually getting those results. For the most part, this is kind of where we're at right now. In these minor tournaments, we're already going to see a shift towards random decks. But then after a Django ban, that shift has drastically increased. One of the big things about the Django ban was not that Django itself wasn't going to show up. It was that other decks now were more likely to be played because they didn't just fold to Django. Again, examples being Kazuda. Sabine was a pretty bad matchup. Basically, any deck that was relying on aggressive units and kind of racing your opponent, well, Django just did it better. And that caused so many decks to not be played. And ever since then, we're starting to see a lot of random ones. A perfect example of this is Kylo Red. Kylo Red, nightmare matchup, Django. It was disgustingly bad for Kylo. You would get Django down early. You would have massive exhaust turns. You can't get in your big damage. Your 1 toughness units, if you're running things like Death Star Stormtrooper or Mr. Bones, which most Kylos are running, just die to things like P38 or IG-2000. And if they don't die, they're getting exhausted. If you try to go for the extra value with Kylo's action, it just gets exhausted. It is horrible. And now we're seeing, Kylo Red actually take down a tournament. We were seeing it sprinkling, but in the bottom of these top 8s in earlier store showdowns. But again, the meta has shifted a lot since then, and I'm really excited. I can't predict necessarily what the entire next major tournament will look like, but I will have basically Han 1. You're going to have Cad Bane. You're going to have things like Anakin, Quinlan, Sabine, probably Gar Saxon, Palpatine. Those are the types of leaders I'm expecting in droves. And then it's just a matter of, are we going to see some more random leaders appear? Because one of the big things is, like, if we look back on some of these major tournaments here, for example, if we just pull up the Atlanta Boston Invitational, what were we seeing? The entire top 8 dominated by Cad Bane, which was designed to go up against Django, Quinlan, and Sabine, right? Yes, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 unique leaders, but all of them were kind of in, big meta decks. Those were the decks that you're expected to see. And if you look at like Denver, for example, what were we seeing? Okay, we saw a little bit of a Luke Green pop up, which was really, really cool, by the way. This is the reason why people are playing Luke. And actually, again, being able to kind of change the way your deck layout was because Django and DJ not being in the meta was awesome. But we were seeing Quinlan, Django, Han. Like, we weren't seeing anything too crazy pop up in these major tournaments. And it was very, very niched down. I'm expecting with future major tournaments to not have such a dominant performance by certain decks like Django, to where we actually will have a few additions. The only exception to this might be Quinlan. And generally the Tarkin Town strategy. You might see a very heavy shift towards Tarkin Town, and you might see Quinlan just perform so well that everyone wants to run Quinlan, and that could be a worry, but I'm excited to see nonetheless. At the very least, I'm glad I see Gar Saxon and Kylo up here. I think Gar Saxon's actually a slept-on leader. Like, even though I made a video about this guy, and even though his matchups up against some of the most popular decks before Django's ban, including Django, were excellent, people were still not given the respect to Gar Saxon. I'm not saying it's like a tier 0 or even maybe necessarily a tier 1, although I personally would put it in like that mid to low area of tier 1 category. It is a strong list, and it's one of those lists where if I were to go back to, like, let's say set 3 or set 2, it would be one of those lists that actually has a competitive chance to win, but maybe not the meta. And that's something that could be really advantageous because Gar Saxon may not be as well known, and you might get a little bit of a home field advantage there since you know your own deck, right? That could be pretty sweet. So anyways, let me know what you think about this. I am not going to necessarily talk about a ton of the store showdowns going forward because we've now have 2 weeks and there's nothing really major going on. We're seeing a lot of the standard stuff. Quinlins, Cads, Sabines, mix of X decks, and I expect that to continue until we see the next planetary qualifier, sector qualifier, those types of level tournaments. We're not going to see many changes. And honestly, most of this stuff is not necessarily unexciting, but impactful, I guess you could say. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all for the next one.